The stadium was deafening. Fans stood on their feet, chanting his name. The scoreboard flashed the final seconds of the game, and on the field, a legend stood still, taking it all in. This was it. After years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, his career had come down to this moment. One last game, one final chance to etch his name into history. Teammates surrounded him, patting him on the helmet, whispering words of encouragement. Opponents, men who had battled against him for years, gave respectful nods. The world knew what this night meant. But for him, it wasn't just about football. It wasn't about trophies or records. It was about leaving behind something greater than statistics, an unforgettable moment that would inspire generations. Few athletes get to walk away on their own terms. Fewer still get to do it on the grandest stage with millions watching. He had spent his entire life proving doubters wrong, and now, as the final seconds ticked away, he had one last chance to prove why he was more than just a player. He was a legend. Before the roaring crowds, before the championships, before his name became legend, he was just a kid with a dream. Growing up in a small town, he didn't have the advantages others did. No private coaches, no fancy training facilities, just a football, a backyard, and an unshakable belief that he was meant for something greater. From the moment he stepped onto the field, he played with a fire that couldn't be taught. He was never the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest, but he was always the hardest worker. Coaches saw it. Teammates respected it. But the road to greatness was never easy. High school scouts overlooked him. College recruiters doubted him. When draft day arrived, analysts questioned whether he could survive at the next level. Yet, time and time again, he proved them wrong. He fought for every snap in college, turning himself into an undeniable force. He went from an overlooked rookie to a team captain, leading by example. He played through injuries, setbacks, and doubts, but never lost his determination. And over the years, he didn't just become a great player, he became the heart and soul of his team. His leadership wasn't about words, it was about actions. When the team was struggling, he was the first one in the weight room and the last one off the practice field. When young players arrived, he took them under his wing, teaching them not just how to play, but how to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves. Season after season, he gave everything to the game, and in return, the game gave him everything he ever dreamed of: glory, respect, and a legacy that could never be erased. But as time passed, the game also took its toll. His body ached more with each season. The injuries lingered longer. The whispers began. Was this his last year? Was it time to walk away? He wasn't ready to say goodbye just yet. Not without one last fight. Not without giving the world one final game to remember. Because for him, football was never just a sport. It was who he was. Every legend faces a moment when the game begins to push back. For years, he had defied the odds, beating injuries, silencing critics, and proving that heart matters more than talent. But this season was different. The hits felt harder. The recovery took longer. And for the first time in his career, doubt began to creep in. Was this the end? The media had their answer. Every sports analyst, every commentator, every so-called expert agreed. He didn't have much left. His stats had declined, and younger players were rising fast. But when asked about retirement, he never gave a straight answer. Because deep down, he knew he had one last fight in him. This season wasn't just about proving he could still play. It was about proving that legends don't fade quietly. His team struggled early, losing games they should have won. The locker room was tense, the confidence shaken. Young players looked to him for leadership, and for the first time, he wondered if he could still deliver. Then, in a crucial mid-season game, everything changed. The team was trailing. The energy was low. The season was slipping away. And in that moment, he did what he had always done. He stepped up. He threw his body into blocks like a rookie fighting for a roster spot. He delivered a game-changing play, one that reminded everyone why he was still here. His fire, His determination ignited the team again. From that moment on, something clicked. Game after game, they clawed their way back into contention. He played through pain, through exhaustion, through everything that should have made him quit. And then, somehow, against all odds, they made the playoffs. No one expected them to be here. No one believed this team had a chance. But they did. And now, he was staring at his final game. One last opportunity, one last battle, the biggest stage, the brightest lights. And he knew this was his moment. He didn't need a championship to prove who he was, but he was going to fight for one anyway. The moment had arrived. He stood in the tunnel, helmet in hand, listening to the deafening roar of the crowd. His heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything this game meant. For his teammates, for the fans, for the young players watching from the sidelines, dreaming of their own moment. But most of all, for himself. This wasn't just another game. This was the last time he would ever step onto this field. As he jogged out, the stadium erupted. The fans knew this wasn't just about winning. This was about witnessing the final chapter of a career that had inspired millions. The opening kickoff set the tone. It was going to be a war. The opposing team came in hungry, looking to spoil his farewell with a crushing defeat. The first few plays were brutal. Hard hits, relentless pressure. The defense targeted him, determined to make his final game forgettable. But they didn't understand one thing. He wasn't here for a fairy tale ending. He was here to fight. Every snap, every route, every tackle, it all meant more than it ever had before. He played like a man possessed, refusing to let time dictate his story. The first quarter flew by, then the second. At halftime, the scoreboard showed a tight game. His team was behind, but the energy was different. They weren't playing for a paycheck or a championship ring. They were playing for him. As he sat in the locker room, sweat dripping, he looked around at his teammates, men who had battled with him for years, the young rookies who had once idolized him, the veterans who had fought alongside him through the ups and downs. He didn't need to give a speech. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was a farewell, written in fire and grit. The second half was waiting, his final chance to leave it all on the field, and he wasn't going down without a fight. The second half began with a storm. The game was tighter than anyone expected. Every snap, every tackle, every yard fought for with blood and sweat. The stadium shook with energy. This wasn't just a football game anymore. This was a farewell battle for the ages. And in the heart of it all, he stood, battered, exhausted, but unbreakable. The opposing defense threw everything at him. Younger, faster players tried to slow him down, to remind him that his time was over. But every time they knocked him down, he got back up. The third quarter passed in a blur. With every moment, the game inched closer to its final chapter. Then came the final drive. 2 minutes left. Down by 4. A lifetime of work. A career built on grit and perseverance, all coming down to one last chance. The huddle was silent. His teammates waited. The quarterback looked at him, then nodded. This play was for him. The ball was snapped. He sprinted down the field, every muscle screaming. The crowd held its breath. The defense collapsed the pocket, forcing a desperate throw. And there it was, a deep pass, spiraling through the air, heading straight for him. One defender, then two. They saw it too. They lunged toward him, arms outstretched, ready to swat the ball away. But this was his moment. He leaped, higher than he had in years. His hands stretched, fingertips grazing the ball. Time seemed to freeze as the stadium collectively gasped. And then, he pulled it in. The crowd erupted. Defenders crashed into him, but he refused to go down. He planted his foot, spun, and broke free. The end zone was just 10 yards away. With everything he had left, he dove. Touchdown. The stadium shook. His teammates sprinted toward him, piling on in celebration. This wasn't just a game-winning play. This was the moment that turned a career into a legend. As he lay on the ground, staring at the sky, he knew this was how it was meant to end. But the real emotions were still to come, because after the final whistle, he had one last message for the world. The final whistle blew. The game was over, but no one in the stadium moved. The crowd remained on their feet, roaring his name. His teammates surrounded him, lifting him onto their shoulders. For years, he had carried this team. Now, they carried him. The scoreboard flashed the final result, a victory. But this wasn't just a win for the team. It was a win for every underdog, every doubter, every kid who had ever dreamed of greatness. As he stepped toward the microphone for his post-game interview, his hands trembled, not from nerves, but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. The stadium fell silent. Millions watched from their screens, waiting to hear his final words as an NFL player. He took a deep breath, looking around one last time. "I was never the fastest, never the strongest, never the most talented," he began. "But I gave this game everything I had, every ounce of fight, every drop of sweat, every moment of my life." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Football gave me more than I could have ever imagined. It taught me about resilience, about sacrifice, about family. And tonight," he swallowed hard, "tonight, I leave this field not just as a player, but as a man forever grateful for the journey." His teammates clapped. Fans wiped tears from their eyes. Opponents stood in respect. Then came the moment that truly broke the world. He pulled off his jersey, his iconic number, now drenched in sweat and history. Instead of keeping it for himself, he walked over to the stands and handed it to a young fan wearing his name. "This game belongs to the next generation now," he said, patting the boy on the shoulder. That moment, a legend passing the torch, would be replayed for decades. As he walked off the field for the final time, he didn't look back, because he didn't need to. His story, his impact, his legacy, they would live forever. If his story moved you, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that greatness isn't given, it's earned. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible NFL stories of passion, perseverance, and legacy.